Namaskar, good afternoon friends, and welcome to this special briefing on President's visit to Vietnam and Australia from 18 to 24th November. To brief you on the visit, I have with me Secretary East, Srimati Vijay Thakur Singh. I also have the Press Secretary to the President, Shri Ashok Malik, and Joint Secretary South, Manish. After the initial remarks by Secretary East, I will request the Press Secretary to share his points regarding the visit of the President. Ma'am, we will start with you. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Rashtrapati Ji will be visiting Vietnam and Australia from 18 to 24 November. He'll be accompanied by a high-level delegation, which includes Shri Anant Kumar Hegde, Minister of State in the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, Shri Kamakhya Prasad Tasa, Member of Parliament, and Dr. Hina Vijay Kumar Gavit, Member of Parliament. Rashtrapati Ji's visit is a part of India's continuing and growing engagement with countries in the Indo-Pacific region under the rubric of the Act East policy. In the first leg, Rashtrapati Ji will be traveling to Vietnam. This will be Rashtrapati Ji's first visit to an ASEAN country since he assumed office. Moreover, it will be the first interaction between the leadership of our two countries after President Chong was elected in October 2018. India and Vietnam have a comprehensive strategic partnership and deep civilizational linkages, as well as regular high-level visits. Vietnam has been the country coordinator for India in the ASEAN for the last 3 years, till the mid of 2018. It contributed immensely to building India-ASEAN relationship in many aspects, including it was the coordinator when the commemorative summit of India-ASEAN took place here in January. This year has been a significant year in our relationship with Vietnam, because President Phu was here for the commemorative summit. Then late President of Vietnam, Trong Dai Quang, was in India in March 2018, and now Rashtrapati Ji would be visiting Vietnam. Rashtrapati Ji will commence his visit in Da Nang. Now, this is a region with which India has rich and historical civilization connect, which goes back and spans 2,000 years. It is the location of the World Heritage Site, My Song, which has remnants of our Buddhist connection and the Hindu charm civilization in the form of ancient temples. And in some of these temples, the Archaeological Survey of India is undertaking restoration work. This will actually be a first high-level visit from India to Da Nang, and signifies the ancient cultural and civilizational links with Vietnam. Rashtrapati Ji will thereafter go to Hanoi, where he will lay a wreath at the Monument of National Heroes and Martyrs and at the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum. There will be a ceremonial reception for Rashtrapati Ji at the Presidential Palace. He will have restricted and delegation level talks with the President of Vietnam, His Excellency Mr. Phu Chong. Rashtrapati Ji will also meet Prime Minister Phuc and other leaders. He will be addressing the National Assembly of Vietnam as well. Our trade relations have grown and registered an impressive growth. Indian companies are there, most significantly the ONGC Videsh Limited, which has operations in Vietnam for decades, and that is one of the cases I'm pointing out as an example of how deep our relationship is. We have institutional mechanisms for dialogue. We have cooperation in defense, security, space, and you would recall that Prime Minister, when he visited Vietnam in 2016, when in fact our relationship became a comprehensive strategic partnership, we announced a concessional credit of $500 million for defense procurements for Vietnam. Rashtrapati Ji's visit will contribute to the further strengthening of bilateral relations and the strong relationship that we enjoy with Vietnam. The second leg of Rashtrapati Ji's visit is to Australia, which will be from 21 to 24 November. This is the first ever visit of a President of India to Australia. In fact, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Australia in 2014, it was a visit at the prime ministerial level after 30 years. And this is going to be the first ever presidential visit from India to Australia. Prime Minister had met Prime Minister Scott Morrison in Singapore recently. And as you know, Prime Minister Scott Morrison just became Prime Minister in August. And in their conversation, Prime Minister Scott Morrison said he very much looks forward to Rashtrapatiji's visit to Australia, and they are waiting to give him a very warm reception and a welcome. In Australia, there will be exchange of views at the political level, and with the intention of taking the relationship forward. India and Australia are strategic partners, and there is a growing cooperation and convergence of views on security, on defense and economic issues between the two countries. In Australia, Rashtrapatiji will be visiting Sydney as well as Melbourne. He will have discussions with Governor General, His Excellency Sir Peter Cosgrove, at whose invitation the visit is taking place. You would recall that Governor General was in India at the founding conference of the International Solar Alliance earlier this year. And he has been to the National Defence College in his earlier capacity. He'll be meeting, Rashtrapatiji will be visiting Prime Minister Scott Morrison. And in Sydney, he will address the Indian community. You know that in Australia there is a large Indian diaspora, almost 500,000 strong, and they have made significant contribution to Australia in the various professions that they are, as teachers, as accountants, engineers, doctors, and they have been a bridge in building relations between our two countries. In Sydney itself, as a part of the ongoing celebrations and commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, President Kovind, along with Prime Minister Scott Morrison, will unveil the statue of Mahatma Gandhi in Parramatta in New South Wales. So this is a very significant event which will take place in Australia. The economic relations between our two countries are growing. Bilateral trade today stands at close to $20 billion, and there are many sectors in which our two countries can intensify their economic cooperation, including in the fintech sector. Australia has come out with a paper, which is the Indian Economic Strategy, which envisages increasing investment in India, the Australian investment in India, from the present US dollars 10 billion to 100 billion by 2035. So we do hope that their funds, and they, including their pension funds, look at investing in India. It is with this view and to emphasize the many trade and economic opportunities that exist between our two countries that Rashtrapatiji will be addressing the Australian Financial Review business event, and thereafter he will also grace the annual dinner of the Australia-India Business Council. In Melbourne, Rashtrapatiji will be meeting the Governor of Victoria, Honourable Linda Dessou. He will also address students at the Melbourne University. As you do know that there are a large number of Indian students in Australia, almost about 70,000, and it has been, Australia has been a destination for Indian students. So Rashtrapatiji will be speaking at the university as well. So I've given you the broad contours of the program and Rashtrapatiji's visit. We are confident that his visit to both the countries will be important, and in Australia it is significant in itself because it is the first visit of a president to Australia. I think I'll end here.
Thank you, ma'am. Shri Ashok Malik.
Thank you, Ravish. After the very comprehensive briefing by the Secretary, there's very little to add. I'd only like to say that this is, to give you some numbers, this is the seventh state visit by President Kovind since he took office in July last year. It's the sixth state visit in 2018. This is the first time, as the Secretary mentioned, that he's traveling to an ASEAN country. It's also the first time he's traveling to the east of India in his capacity as President of India. His visits so far have been to the west. They have spanned the Western Indian Ocean, right up to the Atlantic. This visit will take him to the heart of the Indo-Pacific region. So in a sense, after this visit, he would have finished 16 countries and spanned the breadth of the Indian Ocean. He looks forward to his visits to Vietnam and Australia. As the Secretary explained, he's met leaders from both these countries in this calendar year itself. And so it's appropriate and in some senses apposite that he's completing the circle with return visits. He looks forward to his public addresses and his interactions with the Governor General and the Prime Minister in Australia and the President and the Prime Minister in Vietnam. I'd also like to mention that the three-member delegation from the government and parliament accompanying the President is perhaps one of the youngest such delegations to accompany a President of India. Minister Hegde is 50 years old, and the two MPs are, one of them is in his 40s, the other is in her 30s. This, by all accounts, is perhaps the youngest delegation ever to have accompanied the President of India, certainly one of the youngest. I'd like to stop there, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ashok. Now I open the floor to questions. Tripti?
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. I'm plain curious as to why we did not have a presidential visit for almost 3 decades.
Well, it sometimes does happen that it takes, things happen at their moment, and it is significant that it is taking place. I think that is what the most important aspect is, that it is taking place to Australia this time.
Yeah.
What kind of agreements are we looking at? Because earlier this year, we had 3 pacts with Vietnam, and India and Vietnam, they share a robust defense cooperation. So anything on Akash missile and BrahMos missile?
See, I would not get into the details, but what you have mentioned is something, these aspects are not on the agenda as of now with Australia, and we will, with Vietnam. You know, we have defense cooperation with Vietnam. I wouldn't go into the details and rule out something or add something, but I can say that we have a number of joint exercises with them. We have naval visits with them. So I will profile what we have with them, and what we discuss. We will let you know as we reach agreements.
Sridhar. Sridhar.
Yeah, ma'am, I just wanted to ask, is the Indian vision of the Indo-Pacific, Indo-Pacific region, is that likely to be discussed with the top leadership of Vietnam? Because there are some reports that Vietnam is a bit uncomfortable with the Quad, which India has forged with Australia, Japan, and the US. And apparently they are, the Vietnamese envoy made some remarks yesterday. So is this issue likely to figure when President Kovind meets with his counterpart in Vietnam?
You know, on the contrary, I would say that India and Vietnam share a vision on the Indo-Pacific region. They on the broad principles that the Indo-Pacific region should be free and open, and that it should be a rule-based system in which there is freedom of navigation, overflights, and for trade. So in that sense, I would say that there is a greater convergence of view on these issues.
Ranjit ji.
Vietnam has, ONGC has plans to extend oil exploration activities in the Vietnamese Sea. So is there any firm plan to sign another agreement or something working on that?
See, ONGC has been there for the last 25 years. It has 2 oil fields, and we would continue our discussions with them with Vietnam on the energy sector. But as of now, I would not say that I can at this stage say that there is going to be any specific announcement.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, there are still roadblocks in the import of Australian uranium to India. When will that take place, and will this issue come for discussion?
Would you like to answer?
As you would be aware that Australia had supported us, our entry into MTCR, Wassenaar Arrangement and Australian Group. It also supports our entry into Nuclear Suppliers Group. So as far as, if you recall, in 2014 we signed a Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement which came into force in 2015, November. And Australian Parliament has also passed the Civil Nuclear Transfer to India Bill 2016. And there exists a mechanism under which Australians are supplying uranium to India. So I'd say that there is a framework agreement under which there is a ongoing cooperation in the civil nuclear sector.
So I agree, but the supply hasn't started, and there are some roadblocks.
I think you have not the correct information. I think there is a government G2G track on this, and there is no roadblocks to our cooperation in the civil nuclear sector.
Any other question on any other aspect of Rashtrapatiji's visit to Vietnam, Australia? I see none. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ashok and Manish, and thank you all for joining.